The Copy, Part 1 by Paul Jennings. I was rapt. It was the best day of my life. I had asked Fiona to go with me, and she said yes. I couldn't believe it. I mean, it wasn't as if I was a great catch. I was skinny, weak, and not too smart at school. Mostly, I got C's and D's for marks. And I couldn't play sport at all. I hated football, always went out on the first ball at cricket, and didn't know which end to hold a tennis racket. And Fiona had still said she'd be my girlfriend. Every boy in year 11 at Hamilton would be jealous, especially Matt Hodson. It was no secret that he fancied Fiona too. I grinned to myself. I wished I could see his face when he found out the news. He thought that he was so great. And in a way he was. He was the exact opposite to me. He was smart, always got A's for everything, captain of the footy team, the best batsman in the cricket team, and he was tough. Real tough. He could flatten me with one punch if he wanted to. I just hoped he took it with good grace about Fiona and me. I didn't want him for an enemy. I headed off to Crankshaft Alley to see my old friend, Dr. Woolley. I always went to see him when something good happened, or something bad. I felt sort of safe and happy inside his untidy old workshop, and it was fun seeing what crazy thing he was inventing. Everything he had come up with so far had been a flop. His last invention was warm clothes pegs to stop people getting cold fingers when they hung out the clothes. They worked all right, but no one would buy them because they cost $200 each. All of his inventions had turned out like that. They worked and they were clever, but they were too expensive for people to buy. I walked on down past all the other little shopfront factories until I reached Dr. Woolley's grubby door. I gave the secret knock. 3 slow, 3 fast, and his gnomish face appeared at the window. I say gnomish because he looked just like a gnome. He was short with a hooked nose, and he had a white beard and a bald head surrounded with a ring of white hair. If you gave him a fishing rod and a red cap and sat him in the front yard, you would think he was a little garden statue. He opened the door. "Come in, Rodney," he said. "Tim," I corrected. He always called me the wrong name. He had a terrible memory. "Where's that screwdriver?" he said. "It's always getting lost." "In your hand," I told him. "Thanks, Peter. Thanks." "Tim," I sighed. I don't know why I bothered. He was never going to call me by my right name. It wasn't that he didn't know I was. He did. I was his only friend. Everyone else thought he was a dangerous crackpot because he chased them away from his front door with a broken mop. I was the only person allowed into his workshop. "Are you still working on the cloner?" I asked. His face turned grim, and he furtively looked over at the window. "Shh! Not so loud. Someone might hear. I've almost perfected it. I'm nearly there, and this time it is going to pay off." He led me across the room to a machine that looked something like a telephone box with a whole lot of wires hanging out of it. Down one side were a number of dials and switches. There were 2 red buttons. One was labeled copy and the other reverse. Dr. Woolley placed a pine cone on the floor of the cloner. Then he pressed the button that said copy. There was a whirring sound and a puff of smoke, and then, amazingly, the outline of another pine cone exactly the same as the first appeared. It lasted for about 10 seconds, and then the machine started to rock and shake. The whirring slowly died. The image of the second pine cone faded away. "Fantastic!" I yelled. "Blast!" said Dr. Woolley. "It's unstable. It won't hold the copy, but I'm nearly there. I think I know how to fix it." What will you use it for? I asked. What's the good of copying pine cones? There are plenty of pine cones already. We don't need more of those. He started to get excited. Listen, Robert. Tim, I said. Tim, then. It doesn't only work with pine cones. It will work with anything. He looked up at the window as he said it. Then he dropped his voice. What if I made a copy of a bar of gold, eh? What then? And then another copy, and another. We would be rich. Rich! I started to get excited too. I liked the way he said we. Dr. Woolley started nodding his little head up and down. All I need is time, he said. Time to get the adjustment right. Then we will show them whether I'm a crank or not. We had a cup of tea together, and then I headed off home. That was two good things that happened in one day. First, Fiona saying she would go with me, and second, the cloner was nearly working. I whistled all the way home. I didn't see Dr. Woolley for some time after that. I had a lot on my mind. I had to walk home with Fiona, and every night I went to her place to study with her. Not that we got much study done. On weekends, we went hiking or hung around listening to records. It was the best time of my life. There was only one blot on the horizon. Matt Hodson. One of his mates had told me he was out to get me. He left a message saying he was going to flatten me for taking his girl. His girl? Fiona couldn't stand him. She told me she thought he was a show-off and a bully, but that wasn't going to help me. If he wanted to flatten me, he would get me in the end. Fortunately, he had caught the mumps and had to stay at home for 3 weeks.